as everyone sort of gets settled and grabs lunch or breakfast or coffee, or whatever it is. What do you think? Like 12:31, 12:32? How long does it take everyone to get themselves
Yeah,
settled?
I think that's fair. Everyone logs on, whether it's morning or afternoon.
Sounds like a good plan. Yeah, I was just saying before that my kids are the last day of school today. In the Northeast, it's a little bit later than elsewhere, so they were excited. But I told them because they have a half day, they cannot come home and come on the internet. Can't
No
mess around
way.
with the internet right now while this is going on. So house is nice and quiet,
Good.
which is nice. It won't be the rest of the summer, unfortunately, but at least for now it is.
Right. They come home, they get on their devices,
Uh,
they clog up the Wi Fi.
it's every day. It's every day around the same time that they both get on devices, and all of a sudden, internet connection, or
Yeah.
but not today. All right, we'll give it another just little bit to make sure that everyone's settled in, and then we'll get rolling. We'll wait for that clock to hit 12:32, Lynn, just to
Okay.
make sure everyone's settled. All right. All righty. Got some comments already, so people found the chat, which is good. This system is pretty clean. It's pretty obvious of where to click and stuff, but that is nice for these kind of tools. All right, here we are. So let's get rolling. Well, good afternoon and good morning to you, depending on where you're sitting in the world right now. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar to review our third annual survey focused on all of you. Before we get into the fun details of the survey, let's hit some of the standard techie stuff. You should see a presentation on your screen and hopefully hear me right now. If you have any problems seeing or hearing me, please make sure you're joining this event in Chrome and that your Chrome browser is updated to the latest version. If you have any tech troubles, please just chat in the chat box and our tech team will help with any troubleshooting. And speaking of that chat box that some people already found, please use that area to ask any and all questions as we're going through this presentation. We have some moderators on this call that'll be answering questions throughout and also teeing them up at the end for Lynn and I to answer. So what we're going to do today is go through a quick welcome and intros, then spend the bulk of the time talking about the highlights from the responses from the survey, answer some questions, and then wrap up. So I'll start with myself here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tim Gearhart. I'm the VP of Talent Delivery. I've been with Salesforce for over 20 years. I think it's important to note as we go through the survey results, I'm a true data nerd and probably had way too much fun analyzing all this data. So get ready for some fun with some numbers here. Lynn is joining me to go through the data as well.
Thanks, Tim. And hello, everyone. My name is Lynn White. I'm one of the directors of our recruiting and delivery team here at Cella. I am here almost 9 years. I reside in Maryland, not too far from our nation's capital, and I'm very excited to be here today to review the 2023 Talent Survey results.
Thanks, Lynn. And we have Lindsay, who's one of our moderators. Lindsay, say a quick hello.
Hi, on stage here. I'm Lindsay Mikate. I've been here for 10 years. I'll be behind the scenes answering all your burning talent questions.
I'm impressed with your ability to jump on screen and jump off screen. It's a lot to navigate, so nice stuff. All right. So for those who may not know a lot about Cella, we are a creative marketing, digital, and proposal staffing firm. Our mission statement is we put passion to work. I'm sure that you can all agree with the statement. People who work in the creative marketing, digital, and proposal industry are passionate about what they do and definitely about this industry. So I couldn't be more excited to spend this time together reviewing this information. As I said, it's our third annual survey focused on understanding all of you and what drives and motivates you related to your job satisfaction, job searching, and retention. The responses are going to help us with the way that we answer all of you, but also to help inform our clients about what you're telling us related to culture, remote, work-life balance, money, benefits, speed, all that stuff. All that being said, I'd like to personally thank you for completing the survey. Your participation is what makes this all possible, of course. So as I share the executive summary up on the screen for you to glance through, I'm just going to walk you through the overall general story, overall vibe. No surprise that remote is here to stay. You'll see remote come up in the survey as a driver in many of the responses throughout. The overall feeling that you shared is that the majority are satisfied in your roles, feel energized and inspired. That all being said, the majority are still looking to make a move to a new role in the next 12 months, and we'll dig into a little bit more about that later on. But overall, the major theme throughout is that more than any other year that we've conducted the survey, while there are some clear standout answers, the majority of the time, it's really about a balanced approach that drives best experience for you. So let's all dive in.
So let's get things started and take a look at who completed the survey this year. This is our third year completing the talent survey. I'm excited to report that we had the most respondents this year with 1,624 participants ranging from a variety of different skill sets and industries across our country. For the third year in a row, more than half of the respondents were millennials. When we compare the numbers to last year's data, millennials stayed the same and our Gen Z population went up 11 points. Baby boomers dropped 7 points. So let's take a look at where our participants sit. There was a nice spread across the US, with the largest population of our respondents sitting on the West Coast. California led the pack with 13% of the respondents, and no surprise, the next larger populations were located in our more populated states. We saw a majority of the participation sit in New York, Texas, Florida, and Illinois. For the third year in a row, individual contributors made up almost 60% of our respondents. People managers totaled 41%. I'm interested to see how this makeup of titles and job levels will play into the responses and data that we'll review today. And to take it a step further, we also asked, how many years of experience do you have within your field? The answers told us that 54% of the participants have anywhere from 2 to 10 years of experience within their field. Tim, I'm pulling this out because this data aligns with the generation slide that we just covered. Millennials and Gen Z were shown to be our largest pool of respondents, and they fall into this bucket, making up 67% of the participants who completed the survey this year. This is a fun and creative way to break things up. So let's take a look at this word tree. You may be wondering what job functions completed the survey. While we had a nice mix of different skills, the top 5 skill sets that completed the survey this year fell in the marketing, graphic design, creative direction, project management, and the copywriting buckets. We learned that 83% of the respondents are currently working. 41% of those working are working on a contract or freelance basis. So we also asked the preference of project duration. 78% of contractors prefer a contract or project that is 6 months or longer, ideally seeking something that lasts more than 1 year. This is great news to hear because the respondents prefer a longer contract, and this matches with the duration of most contract roles that Cella supports. I'm happy to see that the projects that we are recruiting on day to day fall into this category.
All right, let's talk about remote. So it should come as no surprise that the responses related to remote have changed since we first launched this survey in 2021, as obviously the world around us has changed during that time. While remote and hybrid continue to lead the way, both based on preference and current work locations, there's some interesting things to note. So let's first start with what you all answered as your preference. 86% responded that fully remote and hybrid are the way to go. However, the preference for hybrid has dropped during that time, while both fully remote and on-site have actually both gone up. When looking at the actual current work situation, we see that still the main majority are fully remote, but that number has dropped from 73 to 57% in the last 2 years. That's interesting because I just mentioned a minute ago that the preference has actually gone up, but this data shows the actual has gone down. That 16% change in fully remote moved to hybrid and on-site, which now shows that on-site and hybrid are virtually even. What we looked at next is to see how much the preference might be influenced by the current work situation. So we looked at those 14% that said they prefer to be on-site, and 86% of those people actually are working on-site, which tells me that the majority of people working on-site actually want to be and are happy that they are. On the flip side, we looked at the people who are working remote, and roughly 20% of those people said their preference would be either hybrid or on-site instead. Hopefully I didn't lose anyone there, But to bring it all together, it's important to continue to discuss your preferences with your managers and leaders to make sure it aligns with what you're ideally looking for, because not everyone wants to be remote or hybrid. This data shows on-site preferences and on-site current work locations are actually both growing. Moving on, we asked a question to those currently working remotely if they feel they have the same opportunities for promotion as members who are on-site. While 69% of you said yes, and that's a pretty strong number, that still means that 31% of the responders said they don't feel they have the same chance to be promoted. That's obviously frustrating for those individuals. And I'll throw a little foreshadowing out there. This comes back around a little bit later when we're talking about job satisfaction. Staying with the remote topic, we asked about challenges people face when working remotely. Well, I was happy to see that the top answer is there are no challenges at all. And even when we looked at this data by individual contributors compared to people leaders, they both answered with no challenges being the top answer. That being said, while it's a top answer, it's still a number I think we'd like to see higher, and it actually did drop from last year. When looking at what the actual challenges are, the main continue to be separating work and personal life, as well as feeling isolated. When we broke this down by job level, the only difference between individual contributors and people leaders was that people leaders rated fragmented team communications as one of their top 3 instead of separating work and life. But the rest were the same. What that tells us is that individual contributors and people leaders, all the way up through C-suite, answered these all very similarly, so obviously feeling the same related to remote challenges. So I highly encourage you to talk to your leaders about these topics in one-on-ones if you are ready.
Tim, I love that call out. Communication with your leader is so important to ensure transparency and job satisfaction. Speaking of job satisfaction, let's take a look at how satisfied our respondents are in their current role. You let us know that 72% of you are feeling highly or mostly satisfied. So let's walk through the reasons why our respondents are feeling so happy. First, we wanted to take a spin on a perspective. So we asked about burnout. With most of the respondents saying that they feel satisfied, we also learned that 63% of our respondents are not experiencing burnout at this time. I love to see these results. And while I would love to see the response at 100%, it is still really comforting to know that majority of the folks are not feeling the burnout. We also asked about nurturing work environments. With most of our responses showing great job satisfaction, we also found that 75% of respondents are feeling their employer places importance on nurturing and retaining talent. Overall, the respondents are feeling rebooted and charged, with a whopping 80% feeling inspired daily and weekly. This left us with 18% of the respondents never feeling inspired or only experiencing inspiration on a monthly basis. For an employee to not feel energized more regularly, especially in a position where they are spending majority of their time week to week, we encourage those individuals to have conversations with their leaders to identify different ways to get that boost. And overwhelmingly, 87% of you said, yes, your job can be completed in a 40-hour work week. I bet this lends to why majority of the group is feeling energized and satisfied in their role. Throughout my many years recruiting and partnering with talent in their job search, I cannot tell you how often folks would share that they were overworked and burnt out. To see the shift that workers are capable of completing their workload in 40 hours most likely ties back to the nurturing environments that our 75% of respondents said that they are experiencing. And with folks sharing that they are capable of completing their work in a 40-hour work week, we also wanted to know if their skills were being fully utilized. While 61% of the respondents said yes, it is also interesting to see that almost 40% said no. If you are in a role where you feel that your skills are not being fully utilized, we strongly suggest adding this as a topic to your one-on-one meetings with leadership. Sharing this feedback with your manager will not only provide you with direction or reassurance that management agrees, but it will also provide you with an opportunity to explore additional stretch projects, passion assignments, and professional development opportunities that you may not have realized were available to you. And while we're on the topic of professional development, which, by the way, I also feel is something very important in career development and advancement, it was really interesting to see what our respondents thought. Earlier in the survey, we learned that our talent were fully capable of completing their role in a 40-hour work week, while also fully utilizing their skills. With majority of our survey takers mastering their skills in a work week, 62% of the respondents shared that a professional development program with opportunity to learn technical skills or training that provides certification were most important to you. We also saw that management and leadership training came in third place with 52% response. To stay competitive and keeping employees inspired, organizations must establish a structured and well-rounded professional development program. So Tim, how about we kick off a poll? We're going to ask you all a question, and we're requesting that you type your answer in the chat. So tell us, what learning and professional development tool or program does your company, or most recent company, offer? Again, simply for this, we're just going to have you throw your response in the chat. Curious to see what folks are using. Skillshare, LinkedIn Learning. You see LinkedIn Learning a lot. The other one that I hear of, Excel training. Nothing else, Excel. Adobe, AIGA, LinkedIn. Ooh, ChatGPT, a little foreshadowing into later on in the presentation. LinkedIn Learning. I don't see Udemy, but I did want to just shout out Udemy is also a really great tool. Recently here at Cella, we launched a partnership with Udemy Business, and we're offering that professional development courses for our talent who are out actively working, as well as our internal associates. And there's been some really great feedback about the different courses that you can take there. Communication, transparency, investment, and inspiring work have been a trend we are seeing throughout the survey results. I like this question because I love how it aligns with that story. We asked our participants what actions by management are important and leave a positive impact on employees. The results were a mix, but a few certainly stood out. Employees want timely and constructive feedback, one-on-one time with their leaders, career guidance, and transparency.
Thanks for leading us through that, Lynn. So overall, you shared some really positive stuff, right? The majority are feeling satisfied, feeling the company puts an emphasis on nurturing employees, not feeling burned out, all great signs. Obviously, like you said, ideally, it's as close to 100% as we can get. That being said, there are still 55% of responders who said they're planning on looking for a new job in the next 12 months. As you can imagine, the majority of those people are the ones saying they aren't satisfied or are feeling burned out. But it's not just that group. There were responders who said they were highly satisfied and feeling energized regularly, who also said they're planning on looking for a new role. The obvious question is why? Well, the first piece ties into the last question you reviewed about what actions from management have the greatest positive impact. It was mostly revolving around one-on-one conversations with managers. When we asked the question about regular one-on-ones happening, we see that it's 50-50. That alone is definitely a driver of people looking to leave. General one-on-ones and one-on-ones about career pathing are major drivers of engagement and satisfaction. So this metric definitely tells part of the story of why the majority are looking to leave. And we heard earlier that 31% of remote responders don't feel they have the same promotion opportunities. Well, then it's no surprise that the main majority of fully remote workers answer that they don't have these regular one-on-one conversations. The next question that we thought connected back to why people might be looking to leave is around how often your role allows for innovation. Basically, 50% said often and always, while the other 50% said sometimes or never, which overall I feel is a pretty strong number. When we asked how important innovation in your role is, over 80% said important to extremely important. So that's where the mismatch comes in and can possibly play into why people are currently looking to leave. Another data point about innovation that I found really interesting is that the group that they call themselves contractors or freelancers rated often and always higher than permanent full-time individuals, while also rating negative, or never, I should say, by far the lowest. So that leads us into the question of why you have resigned in the past. The top 4 clear answers are poor leadership, no opportunity for advancement, and toxic environment. Comp climbed into the number 1 spot last year, but 2 years ago, it wasn't even top 4. The Great Resignation and job market we saw in 2021 and through most of 2022 was definitely a driver of that, as bigger dollar amounts were being thrown around as there was a spike in jobs. But putting all this together, it isn't just about engagement or innovation or feeling energized. It's about every part of the experience. From work location to comp to relationships with teammates, relationship with managers, it all matters. It's about the entire experience. The final question we asked in this section is a new question we added since AI and ChatGPT are all the rage, as we saw in the chat that some people are using it even for professional development. Simply, how concerned are you that AI will replace your job function in the next 5 to 10 years? 50% said between concerned to extremely concerned, while of course that means the other 50% aren't really all that concerned. We looked at this data by the earlier question about job function. The top 3 job functions where people said they are concerned to extremely concerned were front-end dev, SEO, and studio direction, while the 3 job functions that rated not concerned the highest were account managers, project managers, UI, UX, and video roles. So we'll do another quick little poll here. We use different AI features here at Cella to enhance our roles, and I'm betting many of you do as well, again, as we saw that professional development falls into place. So let's just ask this question of, are you using ChatGPT or other similar AI tools in your role on a fairly regular basis? Just simply yes or no. Yes or no in a chat. Are you using it as a regular basis to just enhance what you do in your role? Yeah, no surprise. Yeses are flying off. A couple no's in a row. So still a majority. Yes, definitely some no's that factor into it. I mean, I can tell you I've used it both for fun, just to see what it's all about and ask, silly questions, and also for, from a work perspective of just enhancing our roles and how we do our jobs and just try to make it even better. So good to see what everyone's doing out there.
So now that we understand job satisfaction, let's get into job seeking. So we kicked off this section with understanding how our respondents prefer to consume content and how they prefer communicating with a recruiter or a hiring manager. So we asked, what is your preferred method to consume content? Not surprised here in the slightest, and I agree with majority of the group. 34% of you prefer to consume your content via social media, which oftentimes social media posts do link you back to a lot of the other methods that we do see listed here. We also asked, what is your preferred method of communicating when working with a recruiter or hiring manager? When Tim and I reviewed these results, we were surprised by the response. 60% of you prefer to communicate as a job applicant via email, followed by 28% of you wanting to speak on the phone. Text messaging ranked much lower than I would have thought. Here we are in the digital era where we are constantly on our phones and communicating via text, yet our respondents shared text was a lower communication preference when job seeking. When I think of email, I think of clutter and relentless advertising campaigns. I'm constantly trying to organize my inbox, and I find myself overwhelmed that I could miss something important. As a recruiter, I always felt it was appropriate to shoot my talent a text because I knew it meant a quick and direct way to communicate. I found that applicants were able to get back to me faster, and it allowed for prompt and direct updates throughout the talent's job search. I'm wondering if we'll see text message continue to climb the chart here as we do this survey year over year.
Thanks, Lynn. It's funny, this morning, Lynn and I were preparing for this, and while we were doing our preparation, I actually got a phone call from a number I didn't even recognize, and of course, I didn't answer it. And I said to Lynn, I'm like, well, if they texted me, I probably would have looked at it and responded. Right. And I think that's the nature of where it is and why I think we were both so surprised is that those numbers from that aren't in my contact, chances are not answering it. Text message, yeah, I'll look, maybe respond depending on what it is.
100%.
All right. So jumping into understanding more about how you all approach job searching. The first question in this section is about the amount of time individuals who are looking for work spend searching for a job. While the majority are spending 3 hours or less, when you add up the remaining, it means that the 66% of responders said they spend over 4 hours looking for work each week. And that's up from just 43% 2 years ago. And the largest jump is the people who spent 10 plus hours looking for work. And I can't say that I'm really surprised by that based off of the job market and how it's changed over the last several months. So while the job market overall is still very healthy, we still have job openings over 9.5 million just last month. It's down from the height in earlier in 2022 when we had close to 12 million, and hires have slowed to pre-pandemic levels, which, by the way, were very healthy at that time. I do think it's important to note, though, that it might be a softer labor market compared to the past 2 years, but overall, in the big picture, it's not. We're always interested in seeing what your go-to online resource is when looking for a job, and I'm betting you're interested in hearing what others do too, so let's jump into that. Once again, LinkedIn runs away with the win with 58%, with Indeed as the only other double-digit answer with 19%. Pretty close to the same numbers as last year. What's interesting is when you start looking at it based on different generations. While there isn't anything drastically different, there are some interesting things to note with millennials and Gen Z. The use of social media and Google are higher, and you see Monster, Simply Hired, and ZipRecruiter pretty much fall off the map. LinkedIn and Indeed still lead the way by roughly the same margin, but no surprise that social media as a source is impactful with this group. The next question on this slide I'm always interested in hearing the answer to is anything about company reviews, because there isn't an interview that I conduct where it doesn't come up in some way, shape, or form. Glassdoor has been a leader here for a while, but based on our survey this past year, the lead is dropping a bit. The percentage difference from last year to this year is really spread out to the other 4 sites. So more people are looking at all these sites rather than just running straight to Glassdoor. And that's driven a lot by Gen Z. They're actually the highest drivers of looking at company website as compared to other generations. So it's just a good reminder to use all different review sites, including company's website, when looking at reviews. When asked about the number one factor in a job ad that intrigues you to apply, no surprise the answer is I'm a good match for the job requirements, followed closely by appealing description of the role itself. But again, digging further into the data, specifically with looking at generations, tells some interesting stories. Millennials and Gen Zs both rated explanation of company culture and values as much higher than the other generations. It was still 4th on our list, but the top 4 were all much closer than when you look at the other generations combined. Lynn, a few slides ago, you showed us that social media was a driving factor for consuming content. How do you think that drives millennials and Gen Zs with rating company culture higher than others?
Yeah, no, good question. So like we saw earlier, majority of our survey takers prefer to consume their content via social media. And we also know that the millennials and Gen Z made up a large portion of our respondent population for today's results. Social media plays a huge role in many job seekers' world, and companies know that this is an important tool to promote their mission, values, and culture. Tim, I don't know about you, but most times when I'm interested in a new restaurant or a venue, I'm constantly checking out the vibe and the scene on social media before I dine there. We're seeing the same social media research into how talent view and learn more about a company.
Thanks, Lynn. The other interesting call out here is that we added salary to the list of choices for the first time, since there are more and more cities and states who are requiring salary on job ads. And based on it being rated 12%, it obviously sounds like job seekers are really looking at that as a driving factor. However, another way to look at the salary being important, it's still more about whether you're a good match for the role first and foremost. All right, understanding what you all prioritize when searching for a job helps us at Cella know the right things to inform our clients about and working with them. We saw a pretty substantial change with the results compared to prior years. While the order of the 4 is the same, the percentage are much flatter than the top 4. The standout continues to center around work-life balance and remote, as we saw in the remote section earlier. However, the fact that all results in the top 4 have dropped, the theme related to the entire experience mattering continues. While overall, we see the percentage of individuals still ranking a company's DEI policy as at least somewhat influential through very influential hasn't changed from 84%. The results for both very influential and influential have actually dropped. Previously, those two were roughly 60% combined, and now we see it as less than 40%. While that number might have dropped, it's still a large number. Then digging into the numbers a little bit further, I'm guessing there's no surprise here that Gen Z has the highest rating for very influential. So while the overall number dropped, it's actually growing with Generation Z, so it's important to continue to help have a major focus on that. And finally, the last question in this section is about benefits. And I don't think anyone is surprised the top result is remote, since we just saw that in the slide about what you all prioritize in your job search. However, once again, the results have flattened out. The top three have all lowered, while all the others have raised up. And while there's a clear separation between the top three, it just continues to show that it's about a balanced approach to driving decision making. All right, what comes after job searching? Well, hopefully some interviewing. When asked about preferences related to virtual or in-person interviews, the data shows the majority seem to be comfortable with virtual interviewing, as the number stayed the same as last year, just hovering around 70%. As you can imagine, this is heavily influenced by people's current work location. People who are working remote are happy with virtual interviewing, while people who are working on-site prefer in-person interviewing. However, only at a 60-40 rate. So even 40% of the people working fully on-site still prefer virtual interviews. Always find this question interesting. How many interviews is appropriate? While the general theme still shows overwhelmingly that no more than 3 interviews is the max, what's interesting is that 2 interviews took over the #1 spot for the first time. And that's driven mostly by people who are currently working on site. They rank both 1 and 2 interviews max higher than hybrid or remote workers did. Lynn, we were talking about this as we were preparing, and you mentioned a great point about why on-site workers might be rating 1 to 2 interviews max higher than remote and hybrid. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, of course. So I can totally understand why applicants who report to an on-site interview would say 2 visits is enough. So while job seekers who attend virtual interviews appear to be more flexible and open to more meetings. But if you think about it, when you attend an on-site interview, you are really getting the opportunity to build rapport with the hiring manager and meet other team members. Oftentimes, you have the ability to pick up on the culture and immerse yourself in the organization because you get the chance to walk the halls. After 2 visits, most applicants feel that they have a pretty good enough snapshot of what it's like to work for the organization when they visit on site.
Great points. Thanks, Lynn. So the other breakdown that tells an interesting story is that individual contributors rate 2 interviews the highest, but people leaders answered that 3 was appropriate. So that shows a bit of a mismatch. Managers are pushing for more interviews, but the individual contributors think that 2 is enough. And you can actually see that play out a little bit on the next slide here as well. And the last question in this section is asking if you ever lost interest in an interview process, what is the driving reason behind that? The past few years, there were clear responses that stood out. However, when looking at this data, the top 4 are all virtually the same percentage. Once again, it's about the whole process. It needs to be organized, move along at a quick pace. Hiring manager needs to be selling their role and company throughout. The salary needs to be aligned, and overall, there needs to be communication throughout the entire process, even if the company isn't moving forward with the candidate.
Okay, so let's move into why talent are accepting or rejecting offers. Similarly to why folks are leaving their current role, they are rejecting offers for the same reason. 37% of the respondents have said no to an offer because they were not happy with the compensation and benefits. The next 4 reasons that you see listed here continue to tell the same story. Job seekers are looking for the whole package. Would you be willing to accept a lower salary for the ability to work remotely full-time? 36% said no, but as we learned earlier, remote work is still the desire, and 64% of the respondents are willing to accept a lower salary to have the ability to work full-time remote. This is an interesting question. So we asked the group if they are not actively looking, would they be motivated to jump ship if there was an increase in pay? Almost 60% of the respondents shared that they would entertain making a move for up to 20% salary increase. If you compare this question back to why we are seeing people resign in the first place, compensation ranked as the highest reason. I'm not shocked to see that even a passive job seeker is motivated to make a move for more money. We learned that if a job applicant is presented with two offers, one being contract and the other being permanent, the data states that 52% of you would accept the contract role if the wage was higher or the contract position allowed for remote work. Compensation and remote work have been the theme of this year's survey results. Another interesting stat that comes from this question is if you add up all of these circumstances, it shows that almost 90% of the people would consider accepting a contract role over a permanent position. Tim, that's a wrap. That was our last data slide. So this concludes Cella's 2023 talent survey results. With the most respondents ever, this year's verdict is that talent are seeking remote work, competitive compensation and benefits package, job satisfaction, nurturing work environments, work-life balance, transparency, and a well-rounded opportunity for professional development. Thank you to everyone who participated in this year's results, and thank you to the folks who joined us today. We had so much fun learning more about what is important to you. We encourage everyone who is here today and on the market for a new role to check out our website, cellainc.com. We have some time remaining, so we can go ahead and answer any questions if there were any that came through. So Lindsay, I'm going to kick it over to you to get us started.
Sure. Thanks, Lynn. Great job. One question came through on the chat was around the preferred social media resources. Outside of the obvious, did you have any input on other platforms talent are using? One of the ones I was thinking of was, the increase in TikTok for businesses and Instagram and Facebook pages. But anything you'd want to add to that?
I think we're seeing for sure Instagram recently being a huge place that job seekers are going or companies are using to promote their culture. TikTok, that's funny you say that because I do also sometimes I find myself, at night scrolling through, I'll see some interesting content around, how to even prepare for an interview or things that are related to job seeking. So we are seeing it more and more.
Cool. One question that just came through is, what do you think is the most surprising finding of the survey this year? Yeah, the content around why candidates are declining offers was really interesting. Like we get this question a lot around like what we do to ensure that the total package is there and how we sort of like coach our clients to ensure they're coming up with their, putting their best foot forward. That is something I run the perm team that we talk about quite often is making sure our clients feel like they have all of the information so they know how to make an enticing offer. But anything else on the contract side that we do to ensure our clients are, putting their best foot forward to retain talent that they're interested in? Any other questions through the chat? Just plug them on in. Yeah, thanks for calling that out. No other questions. Yeah. All right, here's a good one. Thanks, Anna. How can one stand out against all the noise when looking for work? That's a great question. Um, I, I guess I could start by saying, you know, it's like the tale as old as time is to be prepared, be overly prepared, have your resume and samples, have your LinkedIn updated, have your picture updated, um, and a good old thank you note. Like sometimes just the communication after the interview gets lost. Relying on your recruiter to thank them for their time is good, but what would be great is following up on your own, and just asking for the job, telling clients you're interested. I think that sometimes goes unsaid based on, on nerves. But the candidates that are showing passion, they're the ones that are always rising to the top, I find. But anything to add? Yeah. Yep. And being able to quantify anything that you can like put in a percentage or, how you've increased and things like that. Here's a great question. I love this one. How do you build a relationship with your recruiter? I often feel when I work with recruiters, I'm just another resume. That's such a good one. Lynn, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I would say, going back to actually the stat about how we were communicating with recruiters, phone call was on there. It ranked second. But I would say push for that phone call. Even though we were talking about text messaging, that was more for like after you kind of have that relationship with your recruiter for those more quick, prompt responses and updates. But I would push for that phone call, get on the phone with them, obviously talk about your motivators, make sure they really understand what it is in your job search that's going to get you excited. But it's the pick up the phone and make sure you're having that conversation. And if even a Zoom could happen, great.
Yeah, even better if you can get on camera. I think relationships are definitely built in person, and that travel time and things that definitely limits our ability to be in person with our reach across the country. But I agree, getting on camera. We often do like interview preps. It's not about prepping for the questions to be asked, but more so like, do you have what you need to be successful? Time, place, logistics. Like those are great opportunities to get on camera too, as you get to know your recruiters, and encourage your recruiters that you're working with. Like, I'm free to be on camera. Can you? It's drop them a Google Meets invite. It's so easy to do that nowadays, through Calendly, just dropping in the video link. So that could definitely have you stand out from the noise too.
Yeah, that's true.
Great questions. Yeah.
Thank
Great
you.
See ya.
Bye bye.